Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for coming to our fifth installment of the Intro to Tech Ethics series. Today we're going to be exploring social networks. Um, you guys know all the social networks, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, there's a bunch of them. And we use these all the time, literally hours every day. But a lot of us don't really take note of the impacts they have on our mental and physical well-being. So with all this information being available to us just by the tap of a button, there's a lot of effects that it has on our well-being. So we're going to be exploring the design of social media specifically. So first, we're going to be talking about addiction and anxiety. This is a quote by Aristotle. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically it states that how humans are naturally social animals. We naturally want connections with other people. We want to talk to them. We want to, maintain those connections, especially like with COVID-19. A lot of us see us not kind of struggling with those connections as we try to do everything online, and especially with the help of social networks, we are able to maintain those connections. So social media is definitely a good way for us to maintain those connections, but when it becomes too much for us, there are a lot of negative effects. First, we're going to be talking about how our brain reacts to social media. So there's a lot of social stimuli that social media provides, such as receiving messages from your friends, receiving likes, comments, and a lot of attention. A lot of this provides our brain, a lot of this makes our brain produce dopamine, which is kind of like the reward chemical in our brain. So for example, when you pull up your phone and you see all these notifications and you see that, oh, all these people like my Instagram post, this makes me feel good. It's kind of like that dopamine being produced. So social media provides unlimited amount of social stimuli, including negative ones. And we'll delve into this a little bit later. Another common feeling that social media causes is fear of missing out. As you're continuously scrolling through your feed, you kind of want that like hit of dopamine, but you're kind of looking through everyone else's highlight reels. A lot of people tend to only post like good things that are happening in their life. So it's really easy to compare yourselves to others. And this is kind of that negative social stimuli. But we still keep scrolling because we think that getting that hit of dopamine is worth scrolling. So social media is addictive because of its high availability compared to a lot of other addictive substances such as alcohol and tobacco. You kind of have to like get those resources, and there's a finite amount of them. But social media, if you have your phone and you have an internet connection, there's an unlimited amount of social stimuli. There's a high availability. You can always look at your phone, pull up new content. And in that sense, it is easier to get addicted to it. Also because there are no clear consequences. For example, if you like are using certain substances, it usually tells you, oh, like this can cause these bad effects. But when you download Facebook, for example, or other forms of social media, they're not going to warn you that, oh no, getting addicted to this could cause these side effects. So in that sense, it is a lot easier to get addicted. Also, a fun fact is that social media is an official addiction on addictioncenter.com, which I thought was very interesting. Because you see all these like substances listed and then you just see social media. So it's kind of an outlier in that sense. So now we're going to be delving more into the impact of design and how specific design elements in social media impacts this feeling of addictiveness and anxiety. Obviously, the like button is the most popular. You see it everywhere from Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. What initially started kind of as a cool way for people to share what they're interested in is now more commonly kind of a way for people to measure like their self-worth and validation, which obviously shouldn't be the case, but it's really easy for people to kind of measure, oh, I'm getting this many likes, but this person's getting this many likes. And it kind of creates that like feeling of anxiety in a lot of people. I know I've personally experienced this, and this design element definitely creates that feeling, even if it might not have been intended to. Another famous design element is infinite scroll. TikTok is definitely notorious for this. You see this never ending amount of content and you just want to keep scrolling and scrolling. The reason why this is so addictive is because, for example, if you want to do something specific, such as tapping a button, that's a conscious decision the user has to make. But for something like scrolling, you don't really have to think about it. You can mindlessly keep scrolling, and it's easy for you to keep doing that because the content never ends. Like TikTok isn't going to stop and say, sorry, we ran out of content and you can't use the app anymore. So this infinite amount of content definitely keeps people addicted on the app. And yeah. Next, we're gonna delve more specifically into certain UX design principles and ethical implications. A lot of the times UI design and UX design are used interchangeably, even though they are not the same thing. UI design is more focused on the aesthetics, the logos, the branding, the visual elements. So if you look at this analogy or like use of the ketchup bottle, the UI would mostly be like the label, the logo on it, how the bottle looks. But if you want to focus on UX design, it's more of how does the bottle look? How will the user use ketchup from this bottle? So that's why it's like flipped upside down, because if all the ketchup comes downwards, it's easier for users to use it compared to the UI one where it's kind of not considering how the user would use the product. So UX design is primarily focused on a lot of research. So designers will interview users, collect like analytics and analyze how users are using the app. They do like wireframes and kind of control the flow of what frames the user will experience. So that's the differences between the two. And now for two basic UX principles. The most important one is knowing your audience. It's really easy for designers and developers to kind of assume what the user would want based on their own wants, but really you can't do that unless you ask the users explicitly. So kind of performing this user research and explicitly asking for this information helps a lot of designers make these critical decisions. So again, this user research is really important when it comes to UX design. And I linked some more UX design principles if you guys are interested in learning about that in the slides. Another UX design principle is adapting for short attention spans. I don't know if you guys know this, but the average attention span of a human has actually decreased from 12 to 8 seconds, which is very sad because it's actually 1 second less than the average attention span of a goldfish. But because of this, a lot of design principles have changed to become more functionally minimalist. So kind of removing unnecessary UI and keeping those elements that create the best experience is what's popular today. So if you look at places like Uber, for example, this is Uber's design website where they kind of share their brand story and their logos and things like that. It's super, super simple. It's just like the text and like a picture on the side. So kind of grabbing your attention from like the basics of the site and not really creating clutter. If you look at like Apple's site, they just have like a big iPad for their iPad page, trying to keep it simple, but still get your attention for what's necessary. An interesting case study is actually Snapchat because they avoid general UX principles that most social media platforms follow. So they don't really have like a feed or messages or posts that get saved. You know, everything is temporary and your homepage is basically like your friends list and the pictures you receive. So we're going to be delving into kind of why Snapchat works if it doesn't really follow these general UX principles. So one popular thing that Snapchat does is Snapchat streaks, and it keeps basically track of the number of consecutive days you and your friends send pictures together, but there's no real reward. It's just a number of how many days you've sent pictures to someone. But why does this work? this is another form of like validation and attention, and kind of keeping that higher number creates that like dopamine production. Like, oh, if I spend this many days Snapchatting to this person, it kind of creates that reward feeling. And this type of Snapchat streak wouldn't really work with adults, but the reason why this works is because Snapchat specifically targets the younger demographic, which are like teenagers or college students like us. So again, behavior of teens is not the same as behavior of adults. So when Snapchat was performing their research, they definitely targeted teenagers as their user demographic, and realized that teenagers are more likely to learn something more complicated in order to fit in with their peers, which is not likely with adults. So once again, this stresses the importance of like knowing your audience. So now we're gonna move into like the ethics regarding UX design. As we said before, the number one priority is understanding the user and representing them. But a lot of the times the businesses like profit and status overpowers representing the user. So there's this thing called dark patterns, which is a user interface that has been purposefully designed to trick a user into doing something that will favor the company. I linked this like article that lists a bunch of different dark patterns, but we're only going to be specifically touching in on two today. One of them is confirm shaming. If you see like websites and they want you to sign up for something, but then instead of just saying no at the bottom, it says something like, oh, no, thanks, I know everything about gardening. It kind of, makes the user feel inclined to actually sign up, because who actually knows everything about gardening? Like nobody, right? So kind of shaming the user for not signing up for their service is a dark pattern that a lot of people or a lot of companies tend to use. And again, here's another example of no thanks, I'm not into savings. Who wouldn't not be into savings? So these are some ethical concerns that UX designers should be wary about. We're going to be delving more into like the ethics and like the discussion of this later on. Another common dark pattern is privacy Zuckering, named after the notorious Mark Zuckerberg. I know a lot of you guys have signed up for apps or services and you don't want to read the entire like terms and privacy policy. I know I don't, it's way too long, and it's really hard for like users to find explicit details that they should need to know in the terms and privacy policy. So that's kind of what privacy Zuckering is, kind of like hiding the important details in this long list of like terms that no one's going to read. So this is an example from WhatsApp where basically their terms said that they're kind of sharing information with Facebook, and it was automatically like set to agree to share their information with Facebook, which a lot of users might not have known and just pressed agree anyway. So this is a lot of concern, especially we talked about data privacy in one of our previous workshops, but making it harder for users to be aware of how their data is being used is also like a design aspect. So UX designers need to like kind of take into consideration of how they're presenting the terms and policy. And it's very common for these to be presented in a really unreadable manner. So on that note, I'm going to pass it over to Jason.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Amy. So that was talking about the design of social media from like a UI UX point of view. But there's another aspect of design we should consider, which is engineering design. So, we're not going to be talking about the specifics of how these websites and services are built, but we will be discussing what are the assumptions that engineers who build these products make, and how might those assumptions influence design, and then how might that design of the algorithm and other services affect users. Particularly, what I'm going to call this section of our presentation is adverse content. So let's go back for a nostalgia trip and pretend it's the mid-2000s again. And you've just started your job at a little tiny little startup called YouTube, not very big yet. And your team is tasked with designing an algorithm to keep users engaged. because obviously you're a small company, you're fighting to gain market relevance. I mean, you can't let Vimeo get ahead of you. You can't get Dailymotion get ahead of you. That's crazy. You're YouTube, you're gonna make it big one day. And you guys have to figure out, how are we going to build our user base? So what features might your algorithm use to determine whether a given video should be recommended? And I'm gonna actually give you guys an opportunity. Maybe in the chat, drop 1 or 2 things that if you were a software engineer in this position, what do you think might be a useful feature for such an algorithm? Okay, David says watch time. Yeah, that might be a feature that we consider when deciding what videos we should be recommending. Videos on topics that you tend to like. Yeah, another really good one. Can we get maybe one more? How many other people watch the video? Yeah, awesome. So all 3 of these are really good. Obviously, I'm not working for YouTube, so I don't know what exactly goes into their algorithm, but these all seem like totally reasonable things to me. And Bill says click-through rate. So yeah, totally. These are all really good. So here's some that I came up with that I think sound totally reasonable, right? Upload date. People generally want to watch videos that were uploaded pretty recently because you don't want to be watching things that are irrelevant, right? Like think about how quickly a meme evolves. If you're watching a video about memes from like 6 months ago, you're a little late to jump on that train. Like dislike ratio. Users probably don't want to be recommended videos that have heavy dislikes because, well, not many other people liked it, so why would this person like it? Number of views. Obviously, if there's a lot of views going on, then a lot of other people are liking it. And let's just go through the other ones. Average watch time. Is the video currently trending? Is it similar to previously seen videos? So I think someone in the chat said, like, we want to consider what other videos the user likes. So if we look at their watch history and notice that they like a certain category of videos, then we want to see if that video, if this new video we're recommending also fits into that category. And then, maybe we want to ask ourselves, have similar users also watch this video? Would similar people like it? And these are all totally reasonable features, right? Like what happens if someone likes to watch FIFA World Cup replays? I don't know how many videos of that existed back in 2005, but if they like that sort of thing, then obviously the recommendation algorithm that we came up with at a very high level is going to recommend more and more soccer videos to them. So job well done. You guys collected your year-end bonus and YouTube is set. Totally perfect platform, totally perfect product, right? Well, as good engineers, we should consider edge cases. What might possibly break this algorithm? And I think one place we can start is by asking ourselves, what if your user is interested in something extreme? And I'm going to put a content warning actually for like the rest of this presentation because we do delve into topics that I think might be disturbing to some people. So I'll just give you a few seconds to think about whether you're okay with that, because I do want to make sure that you're okay with potentially disturbing content. If not, like, it's okay. You don't feel obligated to stay here. So what if your user is interested in something extreme, like pedophilia? This is an article from the New York Times written in 2019. And I took a quote here that says, YouTube's algorithm, in part by learning from users who sought out revealing or suggestive images of children, was treating the videos featuring children as the destination for people. And the extraordinary view counts, sometimes in the millions, indicated that the system had found an audience for the videos and was keeping that audience engaged. So let's think about, let's try to pick this apart. What happened here? How did our recommendation algorithm fail so catastrophically? Well, it's actually wrong to say that it failed. I think more accurately, we should say that the recommendation algorithm is doing its job perfectly. It's getting people to stay on your website for longer by offering them content that they're interested in. And what I will say is that it actually doesn't take that many searches to get your YouTube feed to be filled with this type of content, because the algorithm is a positive feedback loop, meaning that if you are someone who searches out this sort of content, the algorithm will recommend it to you, and you click on that content, and it just keeps snowballing until your YouTube feed is just filled with these types of videos. Now, I want to be clear about something though. These videos are all relatively innocuous, right? If you take one in isolation and just look at it by itself, it probably is pretty innocent. It might just be like some parent or grandparent who doesn't really understand the digital landscape, and they're just uploading a video of like the day they took their kids or grandkids to the pool or something like that. Again, it might just be like a home video, it might be totally innocent, but taken together, the recommendation algorithm recognizes that there are certain frames or topics or themes in these videos that are attracting people who are pedophiles, essentially. And this is causing problems because, well, the algorithm is doing what it's intended to do. And not only that, it's affecting user behavior because now users find YouTube the kind of place to look for this content. And it sort of normalizes this sort of content too, because people look at YouTube and they say, hey, if such a big established company is okay with recommending this type of content to me, maybe it's not so bad after all. And that's problematic. Another edge case you might consider is, what if your user is a child themselves? What sorts of things might the algorithm recommend? And I'm actually not going to include any images or quotations on this because research into this topic gets even more disturbing than what we talked about on the previous slide rather quickly. What I will say though is that if you're interested in doing your own research, a good starting place is to search ElsaGate. And I would also say if you have younger siblings or younger cousins or what have you who use YouTube, please be very mindful of what they are watching, and also please be very mindful of the YouTube Kids app. I would stay away from the YouTube Kids app as much as possible. But suffice to say that the algorithm does end up recommending highly disturbing content to children for reasons that are still being researched. I'm not a psychologist, I should make that clear up front, but people who are in that field are trying to understand what goes through these kids' heads and what that means in terms of recommendation algorithms. Now let's turn and look at Facebook. Facebook has had an issue. It's been on the hot seat for a couple of years now for a variety of things. And one of those things is radicalization. And this is partially related to misinformation, but I think that we can be talking about the design of algorithms for their platform as an equally important culprit for the problem. So again, like YouTube, Facebook has an incentive to design algorithms that keep users engaged and on the site as long as possible. But an internal Facebook memo from 2016 found that 64% of people who joined an extremist group on Facebook did so because the algorithm recommended it to them. Right? So the assumption that we want people to stay on the website has kind of led to this problem of people joining extremist groups, whether that's like trying to commit acts of terrorism or just extreme political ideologies. It's dangerous that the algorithm is doing this sort of thing. And the follow-up memo in 2018 reported that our algorithms exploit the human brain's attraction to divisiveness. And Amy touched on this briefly earlier with like how the design of social media websites might be affecting users' psychology. But in this case, it's something that I think is rather simple that we can understand. When you're angry, you tend to like let those thoughts fester, and anger is actually a really strong emotional response. So when the algorithm finds is that if it recommends content that is incendiary, that is aggravating and makes people like feel super angry and passionate about something, that's just keeping them engaged, and that's more likely to push them towards extremist groups. Now, I want to be clear that this probably wasn't the intent of the engineers who built Facebook back in, I think it was founded in like 2004. I don't think the intent was to radicalize their users, but that's what's happening as a side effect of the assumptions we made when designing these algorithms. So a solution that some people might say is, well, then we should be building safeguards into the system. Maybe we can get some AI on the case, right? That sounds really futuristic. Maybe we can get like a natural language processing bot to check posts and that sort of thing, or some sort of convolutional network to look at those things, which I think we talked about in a previous workshop. I think we had one on AI last week, so check that out if you're interested. But suffice to say for today's workshop that I would say hold your horses. In reality, it's not really AI, it's human content moderators. So the companies like YouTube and Facebook, their solution to monitoring for like the algorithms recommending something potentially dangerous or harmful is to employ an army of humans to check that. But this has consequences, and those consequences are not very pretty. This is an article from September, so pretty recent. A former YouTube content moderator sued the company after developing symptoms of PTSD. And the lawsuit says that the plaintiff was suffering pretty extreme PTSD where she couldn't sleep at night. She would sometimes have nightmares and wake up screaming. She had developed fear of being in public spaces, among a lot of other phobias, actually. And to think about why this might happen, again, you have to consider that these content moderators, in order to prevent the recommendation algorithms from running away and doing all sorts of bad things, they themselves have to manually review and look at all this content. So they might be seeing things that are very disturbing, like maybe if a extremist group posts, I don't know, like a beheading or something on like a video, or if there's some pedophilic content. That's stuff that a human has to sit there and watch as part of their 9-to-5 job. And doing that for extreme periods of time does cause damage, permanent damage to this human's brain. Oh, I did not mean to click that, but that article will be available if you're interested. And then earlier this year, Facebook paid out a $52 million settlement to content moderators who also developed PTSD while working for them. But unfortunately, the solution is kind of just a band-aid because only a few weeks after that, Facebook moderators actually had their time increased and they had to spend an additional 48 minutes of their shift viewing this sort of adverse content. And we can talk more about this in perhaps a future workshop on the intersection of tech and labor. My point here is that the solutions that we're using aren't really working. So maybe there's something fundamentally wrong with the way we assume the design of a recommendation algorithm should look like, because clearly putting humans to fix it is not working. So what now? Is this our future or is this our present? And excuse the fact that the people in the photo are smiling. They really shouldn't be. This is a rather depressing topic, but I think this graphic gets the point across that the design of recommendation algorithms has meant that technology is kind of leading people along, and we're just here for the ride, so to speak, and not in a good way. And I would like to end with this, which is a book called The New Dark Age by, I think the author's name is James Bridle or Birdle, something like that. And although this is talking more broadly about technology, I think that there's a quotation from this book that is relevant for our discussion today about the engineering design of social media products. He says that we are lost in a sea of information, increasingly divided by fundamentalism, simplistic narratives, conspiracy theories, and post-factual politics. And as we discussed earlier, these are all the kinds of things that recommendation algorithms would probably put into people's content feeds, because these are the kind of things that get people engaged and angry. So that's what's keeping them on the websites. Meanwhile, those in power use our lack of understanding to further their own interests. Because clearly, despite all this stuff that's happening, Facebook and YouTube just see their profits skyrocket. So they're benefiting off of all this chaos that's being sown. And so the author concludes that despite the apparent accessibility of information, we are living in a new dark age. It's pretty depressing. There are no good solutions actually to this problem of bad engineering design. And especially considering that social media platforms have global reach, we also have to consider what this is doing to other countries, not just here in the United States, because this was a rather Western-centric presentation. But that's what this is for. Hopefully that we're going to have a good discussion about what can be done regarding these sorts of things. So I think we want to do breakout rooms. At least that's what we initially planned, but there are only 13 people. Amy, do you have an idea? Like, do you think we should do breakout rooms, or do you think we should just do one big discussion?
I think we can just do one discussion for today.
Okay, that sounds good. In that case, I'll go on to the first set of questions then. Oh, before we do we want to share the questions and then talk about them, or do we want to go slide by slide?
I think we can just go slide by slide.
Okay. So the first question that we have is, do social media companies have a responsibility to minimize adverse effects of their design practices on user psychology? For example, should Facebook do something about the fact that users are getting addicted or feeling anxious? And if your answer to this question is yes, companies should do something, concretely, what might those steps look like? And if no, why don't you think that company has that responsibility? And I'll open the floor to whoever wants to offer their insights. So our next discussion question is, what can be done about the proliferation of adverse content? Will AI really save us? Like I said earlier in this presentation, AI is not really doing the job right now, but maybe if you think in some near future that it will, then that's great. But in the meantime, though, even if you think it will save us or it won't, what should we do about the human content moderators who are experiencing deep psychological distress because of the work that they do? And then the last question is kind of the well, I don't know what you'd call it, like the most extreme option, which is just, should we pull the plug on recommendation algorithms? Do we think that the design of these algorithms and their effects is just too dangerous for society? Do we think radicalization is not a desired outcome, and we should just get rid of that recommendation altogether? That's the most extreme option, but again, that's something totally on the table for us to talk about. So I'll open the floor to discussion. Some further readings. This is our wrap up. Really great discussion. Here's some further readings if you're interested. These will be clickable in the slides that we share on the Facebook page after this. So yeah, just take a look at these if you want to know more about the design of recommendation algorithms. Attendance code is social media, pretty easy. So for those of you who are ACM members and you're not watching the YouTube recording, you can just for those of you who are here, basically, you can use this attendance code to get your 10 points. Again, that's social media. Our feedback form, I think Mega dropped that in the chat. You did? Yes? I think someone dropped it in the chat. Okay, so feedback form, please fill that out. And then links, Facebook link for next time, ACM at UCLA links. Thank you for coming, everyone.